Thank you, Ray. It's a pleasure to have an opportunity to talk to the group here. Ray did a good job of setting up the question here this morning about whether new technologies are necessary for the changes in airports, and so my answer is yes. And let's go to the pool. But I suspected he wanted more than that, and I'm glad to do that. I would really want to talk about. I'll split my conversation with you into two pieces. The first piece is a bit of context that I think is important, but having a place here on the second day, you've heard a lot of it. So a summary of kind of what we have been talking about in the second piece is a more specific discussion of what is available to you in technology for managing your interactions, and I would describe it as integration of the TNCs at your airport. Plus or minus?
Plus is green.
Okay. So, kind of what is the issue? We've got an emerging technology that, as we all have figured out, is disruptive. That term is used a lot in terms of technology when what you have been doing just doesn't work anymore. You know that pretty well if you started a business to rent videotapes 20 years ago. Those are all gone. So technologies can eliminate an industry in a heartbeat, whether you like it or not. It's a significant departure from what you are used to seeing. So it's not business as usual. Why? Why is this different? I think there's a couple, three reasons that are important to kind of keep in mind. First of all, this isn't a change that you guys developed. We're used to change coming from internally. The operators make changes in the way they do business with the airport makes changes in the way they handle operators and passengers. This is coming from the outside. None of us here had anything to do with that idea, that spark that caused TNCs to materialize. The second thing is, and I think we've heard it said here before, your customers are voting with their phones. They've decided this is a service that they think is worth patronizing. It's different. When you think about it, the passenger wants to do the same thing that you guys do, that we all do. We want to control our environment. So when they arrive at an airport, they want to have control over how am I going to get out of the airport, what mode of traffic am I going to use, as Mark said, where am I going to pick it up. So they're voting. They've said to all of us, we want to do things differently. We want to be more in control. That doesn't fit our business model, or at least the business model that we've had for a number of years. And as I've heard other people say, it's not going to go away. I don't think it's going to stay where we're at. We'll talk about that in a minute, but it isn't going away. The other thing that I think is interesting and helpful, this is not a single technology. We've got the TNCs, and we're at where we're at because they've combined GPS technology, broadband technology, computer speed, miniaturization, a lot of technologies that have gone together to be able to allow what we are doing with TNCs and to help the rest of us. All those technologies are available to us in a variety of ways. And I guess the other thing is changes are going to keep coming, whether they're operational changes, whether they're changes in virtual hold lots, which we've talked about, beacon technologies for tracking vehicles, big data. I'm not sure whether all of you hear that word, but from a technology standpoint, there's so much information that you guys have that you need to combine with FIDS information, parking information, passenger information. So technology isn't going to stay stationary. I've seen some information that said, some of the operators today that are taxi cab companies are considering the change, and maybe they want to operate in a different way, give up their medallions and operate more as a TNC. Early in March, Gatekeeper Systems put up a community forum for all of your use. Not sure whether everybody got the email, but we did send out an announcement. This is, you can go to www.tncforums.com. We're just sponsoring it. You can go to that website and see articles that are current. We're picking up at least twice a week daily feeds from any source related to TNCs. Took a look last night, and the articles that were added on Monday is an article on Uber virtual taxi queues that they're coming up with. We talked about that here. The bill in Nevada to approve TNCs failed. The same bill passed in Maryland. Uber and Lyft are starting to get into food delivery. LAX is about to allow TNCs to start operating. Kansas City dropped its suit on Lyft. Those are some of the articles that were added this week. So we do that piece twice a week, so you're welcome to go to the forum, take a look at it. It also has a place for documents to store. If any of you want to make your permits available to other airports, it's a place to store them. We'll add them up there for you. There's also a calendar of events, if we want to put that up, anything there. And then there is a question and answer, a thread. You can ask a question, and anybody that sees it can join the thread. All we're doing is trying to create a place where you can all go and get accurate and up-to-date TNC information. We're not going to do anything other than facilitate it and moderate it. The content is all up to you. If you want to use it, you're welcome to do that, and we'll make that available. Let's talk a bit about your response to TNCs. But I think you have the choices that you always have. You can embrace it, you can tolerate it, you can even ban it, and as some airports have issued cease and desist orders, but I don't think you can ignore it. I think you have to find a way to integrate it with what you are doing today. So, not surprisingly, we think one of the best ways to do that is to use technology to gather information, to gather the data that you need to manage your airport. It's a highly accelerated response that we are not used to. Years ago, this is a long time ago, in some negotiation sessions with the airlines, we got into this discussion about long-term planning. One of the airlines said, the problem is airports own a calendar and airlines own a watch. Our time horizons are completely different. Well, guess what? Now we've got the TNCs, they own a computer, and they're dealing in nanoseconds. They also have a different environment. As we've mentioned before here, they got a bunch of money from the venture capital groups. They are not forgiving folks. They have a very short time horizon. If they give you $1 billion, they want their $1 billion back plus 100% in 3 years. So the venture capital, it drives kind of the very short time horizon that the TNCs are looking at, and that's very difficult for airports. Okay, here's my opinion for the day. Peter decided, and Ray decided that we could say things that were maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. As I've watched airports struggle both from the inside and the outside, sometimes an event like this can be used in a positive way to get at some of the things that have been difficult for you to change on a day-to-day basis as you do business as usual. I think this is a big enough event to kind of have that discussion internally with your airport with your organizing board to say, we may need to do some things differently. We may need to take a look at our entire ground transportation program, and those things that have been most challenging maybe deserve a different look. Larry described kind of what Salt Lake City did to him, and I'm not advocating that. I don't know that he would want to go through that very many times, but things like that can happen if you present it in the kind of, here's what we are dealing with, the world is changing, maybe there's an opportunity here to take advantage of that. So if you decide that you do want to use some technology, we think there's really three options that you've got. One is you can do some in-house. Your own airport can develop an approach to TNCs, to data gathering, to fees, to enforcement. Nothing wrong with that, depending on whether your airport has that kind of capability in-house. That's a perfectly viable option. There are third-party vendors that you can obtain technology from, okay? It's an obvious fact, I'll state it. There's two of us in the market. The AAAE option, Gatekeeper has an option as well. So there are third-party vendors out there that can help you if you want to acquire that technology either as a service or as a product. The third one is kind of an approach that some airports, I think it may be viable, is negotiate the best deal you can get from the TNCs, and you basically live with it. We think that that's, in the long run, that's a difficult situation. Politically, that may be your only choice, but it may be, at least in a short run, a viable option. We've talked a lot about enforcement. I want to talk just briefly before I get into the billing side. I think that if enforcement is really up to you and your own situation. There's a law of diminishing returns that says, you know, if I think I'm going to get $1,000 a month from the TNCs, maybe there's a whole lot less that I will do to manage or integrate them. If I'm going to get $100,000 a month, that's a different situation. So you have to kind of adjust your desire for enforcement to the situation. Second thing is, we've talked about the honor system. Airports are no stranger to the honor system in a number of situations. Concessions, food and beverage concessions are one of the bigger ones. They certainly, on a month-to-month basis, are operating on the honor system with those concessionaires to turn in the appropriate fee. But they generally audit them on some kind of a semi-frequent basis, every couple, 3 years, and those businesses lend themselves to fairly detailed record keeping. So the honor system it's not that it can't be made to work or that airports don't know how to use it, but in ground transportation, the transient nature, the very small transaction size doesn't lend itself particularly well to those audits, but those are possible. What you'd like to do is to be able to get enough information to make your own judgment about the problem that you're facing. Larry Donahue is a parking expert. He gives a presentation about the 35 ways that you can get cheated in your parking environment, and so there's all kinds of ways that you could be impacted by the honor system. Not all of them are intentional. A lot of them are failure to understand what's going on, mistakes, lots of things. So I guess my point with enforcement is that I don't think that's something you have to decide on day one. You need a bit of experience. You need to understand what challenges you may be facing and decide how much it's worth and how much you want to get into the technologies of enforcement. And there are a number of options. So you've got some options out there, but I think you need some experience with what you're actually dealing with, the magnitude of the problem. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what criteria you might want to use to deal with technology and the tracking and billing of your TNC operators. First of all, we think that getting detailed, frequent information from your TNCs is your number one priority. Abu did a great job of describing what they have done at SFO. In our dealings with the TNCs, we've seen kind of the impact of that, in that they've come to us and say, look, we've already agreed to a data format and a data content. We'd like to use that in more locations. So we've said, okay, let's do that. So they've agreed and are sending us test data that shows the date, time, location, that is, where on the airport this vehicle was when it crossed the geofence line, the trip type, is it a pickup, is it a drop-off, it is a no passenger, the license plate number, and the device number. So they're acquiescing. 18 months ago, I think, standing up here, we would be surprised that they've agreed to that. They were in a position saying, no, we're not going to provide information, but they've come around, and they're slowly, as they deal with each of the airports and each of the states, they're slowly getting closer to what we think is reasonable for somebody operating at the airport. So that's the data stream that they appear to be willing to provide to airports. We think you need that on a constant basis, near real time if you can. And they basically agreed that they will send that transaction to our system, in near real time. As soon as they've processed it, they'll pass it on to us, to your airport. We think there needs to be some redundancy. We need to make sure that their systems, if they're transmitting data to you, if they run into some kind of a glitch, some kind of a delay, that data is retained and sent eventually to your system. They seem to be willing to do that. That seems, it wasn't something that they had immediately thought about, but they seem to be headed in that direction. There's kind of two ways to do this. One is a standalone system that just tracks TNCs and provides you that data. There's another way to do it, which is integrating it with your existing AVI system. Let me take a short detour here, comment that Larry said, the capture technology is changing and has changed. So we've been using RFID primarily, but we've been using license plate recognition and GPS technology for a while. So all of that looks the same in most of your AVI systems. It needs to be auditable, and I think there's desk audits that you can do with the data. You don't have to be out in the field, but there's certainly field audits that you can do with a handheld mobile device that gives you information on what TNC activity is going on at the current time. And it needs to be flexible and affordable. This is not the end of the road. This is a first stop on the road, so it's going to change, and it certainly needs to be affordable. You need to be able to afford this technology on an ongoing basis. So questions at the end. Thank you very much. Appreciate your attention.